Hello, I am taking on a challenge to beat every playable Nintendo published game. Welcome to the next episode. The next game is Game & Watch Spitball Sparky. Game & Watch Spitball Sparky was the first game in a new series, the Super Color series. Not to be confused with the Color Screen series, which were anniversary-themed Game & Watch systems released almost 35 years later. These units were a bit interesting, as they came with a single long screen and were intended to be held vertically instead of horizontally. The machine would also feature distinct colors for different sections of the screen, which I guess is where the inspiration for the name comes from. Honestly, as far as color displays go, this seems like a step back from the Panorama series. Maybe there's something more impressive about the technology being used here that I'm missing. I guess this selling point wasn't impressive for consumers either, as it doesn't seem like this series sold particularly well. They only ended up making 2 games in this series, making it the smallest of the classic Game & Watch series that they made. We've got another Smash Bros. Reference from this one. Game & Watch's up air is called Spitball Sparky, and it sees him blowing up gusts of air like we will see in this game. Like most Game & Watch titles before it, this one features 2 different game modes, and, once again, features a life refresh mechanic at 300 points. Unsurprisingly, my goal was once again to reach 300 points in both game modes and see the lives refresh. In this one, you play as an armless dude with either big lips or some kind of gust-blowing object in his mouth. The objective is to break a bunch of rectangles by constantly blowing a ball upwards into the blocks. If you think this sounds a lot like Breakout, you'd be right for thinking so. There are a few key differences about it though. The first is that simply lining yourself up with the ball isn't enough. You must also push the shoot button to shoot out a gust of wind to launch the ball upwards. Something interesting about this is that you don't have to wait for the ball to be right up against your character to push it up. You can actually push the ball up at any position within the purple layer of the screen. Hitting the ball at different heights is actually a key part of how to do well in this game, as we'll see later. The other key difference from Breakout is with the physics themselves. Similar to Game & Watch Pinball, the ball can only move into a handful of preset positions, so there isn't really any sort of complex physics engine behind the ball at all. Thankfully, it's handled much better in this one than it was in Pinball. Whenever you hit the ball, it always moves straight up. Once it hits either the top or an object, it will head down in a diagonal direction, always heading towards the center of the screen first. This consistent pattern generally ends up working in this game's favor, as I found it much easier to manage the ball in this one than I did in Game & Watch Pinball. The only real issue I found with this was that since it is so deterministic, it was actually possible to get stuck being unable to hit the ball up to one of the corners. Thankfully, you can get out of this loop by hitting the obstacles that fly across the screen. Doing so can break you out of this pattern and let you hit those pesky blocks on the sides. The game also featured levels that got more difficult as you got further along. The first level only has you hitting blocks from the closest layer, the green layer. This one is pretty easy, although you do have to worry about rectangular obstacles that fly across the screen every now and then. Hitting them just bounces the ball back without you being able to hit the blocks above it. The ball passes right through them on the way down, so you don't even have to consider them while your ball is moving downwards. Every time you break a block, you gain points. Once you clear all the blocks, you will also gain bonus points depending on how fast you cleared the level. This is represented by these black rectangles along the top, which decrease in quantity the longer you take. The next level introduced the blue layer and added another section for obstacles to appear in. In some ways, this was actually easier, as you had more time to react to the ball as it moved to the bottom of the screen. The next level had blocks placed in both the green layer and the blue layer, and in the 4th level, they introduced the final layer, the red layer. Blocks in this layer have to be hit twice. This is represented by the blocks flashing if it has already been hit once before. They keep adding more and more blocks like this until eventually you reach a screen that is completely full of blocks, and from then on out, they keep repeating this pattern over and over. By the time I got to this level, I was already almost at 300 points, but I unfortunately got stuck in one of those loops for quite a while here. Thankfully, I still managed to beat the level and got to 300 near the start of the next one. I kept going after this, and I got to 414 points before ending the run. Next up was Game Mode B. In this mode, all blocks in the blue and green layer will occasionally vanish, and you'll pass right through them. Red blocks don't behave this way though, and instead, if you clear out all the red blocks, the blue and green blocks will stop flashing. Because of this, they throw red blocks at you right away. Other than the addition of the early red blocks though, the way they added more blocks as you played was largely the same. I think I was starting to get a bit sloppy during this one, as I lost 2 of my lives before even reaching 150 points. Thankfully though, I was able to pull myself together, and I got to 300 points on my first try. With that, Game & Watch Spitball Sparky was complete. On to the review. While I was initially concerned that this one would feel janky, similar to Game & Watch Pinball, I thought this one turned out alright. Instead of trying to simulate complex ball physics, they kept it simple, which ended up working out in the game's favor. While the Super Color series itself feels like a bit of a step backwards, especially considering the complete lack of backgrounds in this one, the gameplay was still solid enough that I enjoyed my time with it. Of course, like all Game & Watch games, the lack of variety made me lose interest quickly, and I gave the game a 6 out of 10. Thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more of these in the future, make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you won't miss out on the next one. Also leave a like if you enjoyed it, since it will help the channel grow and motivate me to continue this series. I hope I will see you in the next step of my quest to beat every Nintendo game.